I believe we are live. Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of the HaytersTV podcast with, as always, your host Charlie Willard. And today join with me, we haven't got Nick, we have got another Mr. Hayters, and that of course is Jerry Cox. Jerry, how are we doing?
I'm really good today and really excited to see our old friend Nizaar Kinsella in here from the Standard. He's come hot from the paper. Breaking news, really. One place to start, I think.
Yeah, it's just literally breaking right now that Manchester United have agreed a £60 million fee for Mason Mount. So 55 million up front and then 5 million in add-ons. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of the big transfer stories of the summer, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you're a Chelsea, you cover Chelsea. It's your beat was with goal.com, now the Standard. This is the one that probably most Chelsea fans didn't really want to happen, isn't it? We know they've got to offload players, but I think Mason Mount was really popular, wasn't he?
I think he was a popular character, homegrown. He's like sort of almost took on the mantle a bit of with Reece James, as sort of a Mr. Chelsea type figure that Lampard and sort of John Terry had back in the day. And you thought maybe these two academy boys would be at Chelsea forever. I certainly did actually for a long time think that they were just going to be around it all and build a new culture. So for Mount to go out, I think that's the hard part, is that you can't really picture him in another team's shirt, really. I've been watching him play for Chelsea since he was about 16 years old when I first was aware of him, but he's been at the club since he was 8. So it is quite shocking to see him go away, but Chelsea just couldn't agree terms with him. The contract negotiations didn't go very well, so with 1 year left, it's pretty sensible actually to accept £60 million for a player. It's actually quite a good fee for a player with just 1 year left in his contract. No matter sort of the emotional side of it, it's good business in a way, right?
Yeah.
And as well, they've gone almost bang in the middle, because there was complications, wasn't there, with the price, especially a player like Mount. You want to get it right. 65 million, I believe Chelsea wanted. Manchester United was so set on that 55 million, so it looks like they've gone bang in the middle.
I know, and Manchester United was sort of really set. They said we wouldn't go over 55 million, and now they're sort of paying 60 million, but I guess they could argue it's only 55 million up front, so maybe in a way, and maybe the add-ons are quite hard. We don't know what the add-ons specifically are yet, like how they would sort of be payable. Sometimes it's like if they win the league, if they win the Champions League, if Mount wins the Ballon d'Or, that kind of thing does come into play with add-ons. So it'll be interesting to see maybe if those details ever come out. But certainly I think both clubs can be relatively happy. That's why sort of these deals happen. It's because all parties are happy. And also let's not forget Mount in this, because he did want to leave. And that's the unfortunate part, is that he was ready to leave. He wasn't renewing his contract, and he was going to go somewhere. He was going to go to a big club, and it ends up being Manchester United, and that's a good move for him. And I think he'll be happy with that.
And from their point of view, for United, I mean, he's a great player. He's an England international, Chelsea's Player of the Year for 2 years running. But there are fans, and you're from Manchester. You'll probably know some of them. There are fans who are saying, is he the player we need? I mean, what's he going to give United? I
think we see it with England and Chelsea fans that sometimes they're a bit scathing of Mount. He doesn't do enough in some people's eyes. He's maybe not exciting enough. I remember when I was covering England during the last World Cup, and Declan Rice was asked about Mount again. You know, why do people not like him?
That's a proper bromance.
They're best friends,
proper
right?
bromance.
But I think he put it really well. And this is a guy who knows football and considers it really carefully. He said he's not really an example of what people expect from an attacking midfielder, in that he's very tactically aware, very technically good, but he doesn't do that Jack Grealish sort of dribbling. He doesn't quite have the spectacular balls of Bruno Fernandes or James Maddison, so he's kind of more of a conservative player, but he's really physically impressive, never gets injured, 7 out of 10 every week, really tactically good. I remember the Champions League semi-final when Chelsea went on to win the competition. Mount was exceptional against Real Madrid in the semis, and he was very tactically aware where he could join attacks and when he had to drop in midfield, and he sort of smelled the danger in the game really well and was really influential against one of the best midfielders in the world. So I've seen Mount have unbelievable games. I think he's going to be a great player for Manchester United, and I think that they need a player, because watching them last season, Eriksen sometimes tired a bit. He got injured for that spell as well, and they were a bit lacking in midfield. And we know Man United's midfield has been a problem for a while. So with Casemiro as a really solid holder, I think they can afford a Mount, a really good number 8 to shuttle in up and down alongside him with sort of what Bruno does and what Eriksen does.
And as well, you mentioned his strengths, but he's also a player that can add you goals and assists.
Yeah.
I mean, not last season, but the season before, over 10 goals, 10 assists, I believe. And again, a player of his quality and an English quality as well, which English clubs love, having a top quality English player.
Yeah, no, and especially Manchester United. That's what Sir Alex Ferguson used to do, didn't he? He always signed the best from Britain, so Wales, Scotland, England, and Ireland. So it's great that we have Mason Mount just at this sort of level. I think it's good for him to move on in his career if he wanted to move. It would have been horrible for all parties, I think, to see him just sat around at Chelsea. His contract's expiring, not playing his best. I mean, I think, to be honest, last season the contract situation was part of what made him play not as well as those seasons before that you mentioned. So yeah, when he's at his best, he provides goals and assists, and yeah, he's a good player, a really good technician.
And touching on some more outgoings, one that is 100% confirmed as of yesterday, which is Kai Havertz. Yeah. I want to get your opinion on this, because I know there was a lot of people in world football that was very shocked to see Kai Havertz go to Arsenal. Was you one of them people to see that happen? Was it quite shocking for you as well?
Well, I remember when I was sort of looking at the transfer window after the season had ended, and it did feel like Havertz was going to leave, to be honest. He did have 2 years left on his deal rather than one like Mount, so maybe Chelsea could have dug their heels in, maybe tried to ride it out, convince him of the project. But similar to Mount, he did want to leave. So again, you cash in, you've got a big bid, 65 million or 67 million maybe it was in the end. So it's kind of like, let him go. But then to go to a rival, it's quite hard. But the other thing about sort of Mount and Kovacic and Havertz going to rivals is that the Premier League is the strongest league in the world now, and I mean financially is the important aspect. So Chelsea had a bid on the table from Real Madrid that was much lower, but they go and accept much more money from Arsenal, and that's what Chelsea wanted to do. So if you want to sell abroad, you can get less money and maybe send them there, but actually it's a lot easier to sell in to your rivals. So maybe sometimes you have to consider it, especially if the player wants to leave. So they kind of have ended up doing that with Havertz and with Mount.
Yeah. And I mean, you touched on it earlier, seeing Mason Mount coming through the ranks at Chelsea. Declan Rice, his big mate, coming through as well. Who'd have thought, 7-8 years on, those two would be going in the same week for such big money. I mean, looks like it's been going on. Charlie's been following this every single day.
Chaos.
Every day.
Chaos.
He's obsessed with the Declan Rice deal.
Yeah.
But it looks like that's pretty close to completion now as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And again, he's one of those players that Chelsea sort of let slip through, didn't they?
Yeah.
Kevin De Bruyne and Mo Salah, will they look back on that and regret it, do you think?
Yeah, kind of. I know Rice has spoken about it a bit, but he was kind of let go because he was a bit too languid. He had a massive growth spurt in the academy, and a few of the coaches thought he technically looks really bad because, when you have a growth spurt, sometimes you can't really control your feet as well as before. So, I mean, countless players have this happen to them in their youth career, get kicked out. And even at West Ham, apparently, they weren't totally always in love with him until sort of he got towards the first team. So, he's kind of had that, all his youth career that he's had to prove himself. And I think that's actually part of what makes him tick and what has driven him to the top. He works harder than anybody else. He's really worked on his game. I even remember one of his first England appearances. I spoke to him and I said, like, what do you need to improve to sort of make sure you stay in the team? And he's like, I need to be able to move the ball quicker. Like, you look at some of my teammates and they do it. And of course, he made his England debut pretty close to when Mount did. So it seems like their careers are almost side by side, best friends, which is quite heartwarming. They do help each other a lot. And I'm sure they would have been text each other gossip about their own transfer scenarios during this summer. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny that they both go at such a time. But, I mean, the Rice deal's solid. I think he always wanted to go to Arsenal. I remember the first time I got wind of it was like January, when he was totally seemed set on Arsenal. He seemed to almost make the decision then, and it was just about doing it and also doing the job for West Ham and then sort of getting the deal over the line after that. And he certainly did the job for West Ham, winning the Europa Conference League and then getting the transfer. I know there was a bit of thing, with Manchester City coming in late, but I always felt it had to be Arsenal for him because they just had a great plan for him. I think he really believed in that plan, believed in what Arteta wanted from him. I think also, let's be honest, Arsenal need him more than Manchester City. So in every single way, I think it's a perfect fit for him. So it's, it's a great transfer for both the player and himself, and also West Ham. Great fee. Wow. Yeah. 105 million. I think they should be happy with that. But that's the going rate now for a top English player, isn't it? With Jack Grealish going for similar money.
And what are they going to do with that? Because, we all remember Spurs really squandered most of the Gareth Bale money, didn't they? Probably only Eriksen was the really successful out of those 7 they bought. So for West Ham now, it's really about making sure they don't waste that money the way Spurs did.
It can be tricky. You can end up falling into a trap of buying many replacements like Spurs did, and none of them are that good. So I think they need a midfielder, of course. That'll be a thing. One of the main things they go for. Strikers certainly on the agenda. Letting Scamacca go, letting him go on loan, probably rebuild his value. Maybe sell him the summer after and then get a striker in. So I think that those two are really high up the agenda at West Ham.
Now, one of the reasons you were late, and Charlie mentioned at the top of the hour, Evening Standard, so it's a London paper and it comes out during the day and it's breaking news all day. Big story you've got there, Mount Sale will free up Chelsea to buy more. Poch starts Monday, that was one of yours today. Yeah. And he has got a lot of work to do, hasn't he? It's such a big turnaround of that club.
Yeah,
a lot to get out. Any more coming in?
There will be. I think the first one they've already got Christopher and Kunku in. They're going to bring back Levi Colwill and Malo Gusto from loan spells at Brighton and Lyon, and then they're going to look towards the midfield. I think obviously Jackson as well from Villarreal. There's a striker coming in, so that one medical done over the weekend, not been announced yet, but should be announced very soon, maybe tomorrow, to lift spirits after Mason Mount leaves. And then you've got sort of a midfield situation to sort out now. They've sold so many midfielders. We mentioned Havertz, we mentioned Kovacic, we mentioned Mount, but also Kante has left for free. So there's a lot of midfielders going out, and Moises Caicedo is the main target, and he has been for a while. I think that should happen. I think that. It's going to be a substantial fee. Fee's the hardest thing. The player wants to go to Chelsea. Brighton will let him go for a large fee, but I think that fee is going to be the issue. So it's just a case of how much now at this stage, and that's something to thrash out. But looking at Chelsea's bank account, especially after the Mount deal, it shouldn't be a problem really.
Yeah. Amazing.
Before we do continue with the amazing transfer talk, first of all, we want to say thank you, Nizaar, for coming in. I just want to give a quick shout out here from Annie B. He says, thank you for watching. MM says, brilliant channel. Nathi says, wow. There's a lot of amazing people in the chat right now. But as well, I want to quickly say, please make sure you do drop a like, subscribe, and of course, turn the notification bell on, because as you can see, the production levels are on their way up, people. Let me tell you that. And more podcasts and amazing videos from us are going to keep it coming. But yeah, back to the chat. Let me know as well in the comments where you're watching from. That'll be amazing. I know we've got a few people across Africa that always tune in for Haters, so that's amazing to see. But what I want to quickly see here, Annie's actually donated and said, why weren't Chelsea in the Rice hunt? Which, funny enough, Annie, you read my mind. It was actually my next question. Because he's a Chelsea, he used to play for Chelsea in the academy, Chelsea fan as well. A lot of his friends and family as well are Chelsea fans. And I know a lot of Chelsea fans are going to be disappointed to see him play for Arsenal. Was it ever a case? Because I know that he was probably linked with Chelsea during his time at West Ham. But was there a real strong possibility that he could have a blue shirt on?
Massively. At certain times of his career, it's been a huge possibility, I think. When Frank Lampard was manager, it was pretty much his dream to bring Rice in to join the midfield. And Thomas Tuchel really liked the idea as well. But there's been, I mean, even in the Abramovich era, there was a bit of uncertainty around Rice from Chelsea, surprisingly. I mean, some of the reasons why they released him, they didn't quite think he'd got his technical game up to the level that they'd want. Chelsea have always been a possession team in recent years, not quite that gritty team that we remember from Jose Mourinho's era. They've certainly evolved into another level of sort of technical ability. So I think that they've gone down a different route and not maybe thought Rice would be a great fit. Of course, the cost as well, increasingly, not only sort of like the transfer fee, but the wages would be very high. English players as well, they're not going to sign these 8-year deals that Chelsea have been putting players on. They're just not interested in it. I mean, Mason Mount didn't want to sign a sort of 8-year deal, that kind of deal. And it's very rare to get an English player on that. So I think that also the fact that Mount was on his way pretty much since about February, I think Mount's been sort of heading towards the exit door. So, when your best friend's leaving, the club that maybe you wanted to both join and play for, and certainly they'll have had conversations about that, it was another factor. And also it kind of coincided when Arsenal sort of locked down Rice. It was around January, I thought, where they just sort of really, made sure they were in a strong position for Rice for this transfer window. So Arsenal really locked down that transfer. Man City came in, but I just felt that Arsenal were always in control of the situation. It was just about price. just about getting it right with West Ham, and they did. So, I thought Rice, loads of times he could have gone, but not during this transfer window. It never felt on the cards during this specific transfer window, and not really during this ownership either. And it never felt on that much.
I was about to say the ownership, I think, has a massive factor into maybe why Rice didn't join, because as such, the state of the club isn't exactly as healthy as it has been. A lot of money's been spent. So do you think that's maybe the biggest factor out of everything here?
Yeah, I think that's it really. Yeah, I think that Rice probably would have had his pick of all the English clubs, and maybe Chelsea not in the strongest position right now. And then coupled with some of the other factors like Mount leaving, like the contract situation, just Arsenal getting in his head as well, just never felt on. So yeah, certainly Rice to Chelsea. It's not really been on the agenda. I've not really been thinking about it, and I don't think they ever seriously were in the race this time around.
You just reminded me, actually, when you said about Frank Lampard wanted to bring Rice in. If you were, I think you were there at the end, towards the end of the season, one of the last games, he did a little breakout with us, and he said, we were talking about Erling Haaland, and he said, I recommended him to the board when he was there as a manager the first time round. And this was before Haaland joined Dortmund.
Yeah.
And the board didn't really think he was good enough. Or they didn't think he was a player that Chelsea wanted to sign. So you can add that to the list of ones that got away, can't you?
Well, Manchester United also missed out that time around as well, so it wasn't easily done. Yeah. But
so it just shows you, doesn't it? You know, sometimes the manager spots one and the board don't agree, and they don't always come through, do they?
Yeah,
so
maybe Lampard had some good ideas as well, but unfortunately, that's almost a sliding doors moment that didn't happen. Yeah.
Now, talking about Poch, Chelsea. There's an obvious fit there, and the stories come out yesterday about Harry Kane building a house long term where he wants his family to be in Wentworth, which is not far from Cobham, the training ground, which has inevitably led to stories that maybe Harry Kane will go to Chelsea on a free maybe next season when his contract runs out at Tottenham. I mean, could you ever see that happening?
I mean, I think Pochettino would love that, and Daniel Levy would hate that. So the end of their friendship for sure. I think that it could only happen on a free transfer, and even then, maybe Kane would feel, uncomfortable about it. Maybe I think that he might consider. I mean, you can always go away to Manchester for a few years and maybe upset people a bit less than doing that, but. It certainly would be controversial. It would be almost Sol Campbell-esque.
Well, that's the one I was thinking of. I mean, he's never been forgiven, has he, for that one from Tottenham fans?
So it's playing a little bit dangerously with his legacy if he does that. Certainly, I think from a Chelsea perspective, you'd be interested, and I think they might have a need for a striker next summer as well, especially if they don't sign another one, because they might be going to the season with Christopher Nkunku up front alongside Armando Broja and also Nicholas Jackson. So two inexperienced ones and not a proper striker. So
they've got one on the books.
Yeah,
Lukaku.
And that's a big player to have on your cards.
They've also got Aubameyang as well.
Well, I think we can assume Aubameyang's going or gone, but Lukaku is still a major player, isn't he? And it didn't work out the second time around for him. But is there any way back?
I don't think so. Not for him. I think for Chelsea they would maybe be open to it, but I think it's become very clear recently that there's no way back for him in his mind, because I think that it's almost traumatic, the experience he had at Chelsea. He's really lost the fans. Does he want to come into an environment where he's up against it right away? And that's potentially what it would be. So he's rejected a lot of offers from Saudi Arabian clubs. I think it's Al Hilal, the club that's really pushing for him, and Inter Milan is the one he wants. So he's kind of waiting it out, hoping the two clubs can come to a deal. But Chelsea have said no loans for him or for pretty much any senior experienced player right now, so they're just trying to sell everyone. Everyone's for sale in that sort of category of Lukaku, Koulibaly, Mendy. A lot of them have gone to Saudi, but the ones who aren't going to Saudi, they still want to sell them. So I think they're happy to sell him if he wants to go. Mount wanted to go, Havertz wanted to go, and now Lukaku wants to go. So it's probably the best and easiest thing to try and get him out the door relatively quickly.
And that number 9 is a jinx, isn't it? The number 9 shirt at Chelsea for 10 years or more, it's been an absolute, who would take that on now?
Credit to Aubameyang for taking it, but it's not worked out for him either. But
and he said that, didn't he? He said, I don't mind. I don't feel there's going to be a jinx. But wow.
But the striker option at Chelsea, we're actually in our first podcast, by the way, and if you haven't checked it out, please do, with Darmish. We were talking about the striker option at Chelsea, and MM in the chat as well, shout out to you, has said the exact same thing. What is your thoughts on the striker striker situation at Chelsea, because we mentioned Lukaku, we mentioned Aubameyang, but for me, the last striker I can remember at Chelsea that really, really delivered was probably Diego Costa.
Yeah.
The year they won the league, of course, he was absolutely fantastic. Fabregas in midfield as well. Chelsea haven't really had too much of an issue, maybe in defence, maybe in midfield. Their striker and scoring goals has been the real problem, especially under Graham Potter as well. No goals really at all. Yeah. So how do you assess that? Is Jackson the man to fill that spot up front, or...?
I'm a bit nervous about Jackson. He's young, he's unproven, he's a bit of a rough diamond. I wrote a nice piece about him that's coming out soon on the Standard, and sort of looked into his background. But he's really only had 2 or 3 months of great football where he's really dominated. I mean, even at Villarreal, he started the season on the bench. Unai Emery had him in and out a little bit when he was managing there, now at Villa. So he's kind of had to really prove himself this season, and he has, and he's done really well, but I just don't think he's established yet. So we can't guarantee he'll be a success. I think, maybe they're really clever, Chelsea. Maybe they've found a gem that they can, turn into a top player. So I think that's what they're thinking. But they're going to have to do some work with him, I think. And same with Breuer. I really like him. He's a great talent. But
he should be fit, shouldn't he? But it's whether he's a goal machine, which he's not really, is he? He's more a wide player who can come in and score goals.
Well, I think he could become a goal machine, but he's just sort of finding his feet at this level, I think, a bit. So I think that Pochettino has some work to do around the forwards, but I think the most important thing really for Chelsea is almost tactical. It's looking beyond this. It's about building a team spirit, and hopefully some people step up with goals. I mean, Sterling's in the past has got great goal returns, so you can get goals from other places. Liverpool get the goals from the wings, so it doesn't have to be the front men, does it?
But Pochettino, he loves that sort of developing young players. He likes that sort of family spirit. Can he get that at Chelsea, or he's still got to clear out a few more, isn't he? We've seen, was it Loftus-Cheek going today?
Yeah.
Ziyech is gone as well. There's quite a lot of those players who are squad players seem to be going as well.
Yeah, they've done well.
Still a few more to go?
Yeah, still a few more.
Pulisic, maybe?
Pulisic. I think that maybe there's a few others. There's Azpilicueta's, his future's in doubt. Big one really. Legendary player. Trevor Chalobah might leave, I think. So there is a couple more. And then I think that Pochettino's really building something from scratch here. Chelsea were in such disarray last year that I think that there was a lack of sort of team spirit around the dressing room. That needs to be fostered. Need to improve the fitness levels of the squad. Need to just build an identity, a tactical identity. When you've had 4 managers, you don't have a tactical identity. So that's what this pre-season is going to be about. He's going to have 2 weeks at Cobham and then 3 weeks in America, and then he's going to come back to the UK for 1 more week before the season starts at home to Liverpool. So he's got to do a lot in that time, and almost start with players who don't know each other that well as well. Going to be a few signings, loads of goodbyes. It's a bit of a bittersweet summer for Chelsea, but actually they've sold players so fast that they might be in a good place for pre-season that Poch can start building all the things I just said.
It's a similar situation when he went into Tottenham, because he had to get rid of a lot of dead wood, which was from the Bale signing. He had a core of good young players, so he brought through Harry Kane, Ryan Mason, Andros Townsend, and so on. And then he fostered that team spirit. He had a young Dele Alli. Ericsson was the one, still young, who was a success with the Bale money. And Eric Dyer had just come in as well. So he had that young, hungry core, and that's what he's got to do. But it took a year really before he got that going. And then of course they were just pipped to the title that year by Leicester, and they had a real go, didn't they, for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it was an incredible effort, wasn't it? I think that season though was a bit, all the big teams seemed to be in disarray, didn't they? So that's why Leicester went and won the league.
I think,
Pep just arrived, and the other teams weren't really ready to be as dominant forces, and now you've got Manchester City who are a bit tough, so to beat. So the landscape is a bit trickier, I think, for Chelsea. But they've got to really start from sort of square one and just sort of build up. And I'm not expecting too much from Chelsea right away, but I think they've got the right manager in, absolutely, for what they've got to do. So in a way, I'm really positive, but in a way, I'm also like, this is going to take time.
For you as well, for me watching from the outside with Graham Potter, the relationship between him and the owner is really, really important, isn't it? Especially with the owner buying players. Maybe I found that Graham Potter looked to be quite oblivious at times with some of the players that are coming in. So do you find the key factor going into this season is Poch really creating a good relationship with Todd Bowley to then not only have an impact on the pitch, but then it adds a massive impact to fans watching around the world.
You definitely have to manage upwards in these clubs and in these top jobs. And Pochettino had a tough. We talk about Spurs, but he's at PSG as well, which was quite tricky. So he's got a bit of that chaos at Chelsea, maybe to deal with. Although it does feel a bit more controlled now than last season already, because they've got 2 good sporting directors in, one from Brighton and one from Monaco. So yeah, they've got Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart, and they're doing the business more than Todd Bowley. So he's taken a step back. He knows a bit of what's going on, but he's not doing the day-to-day. So they've got like dedicated football men in the job now. So hopefully that will also help, and Chelsea will be a bit more coordinated and keep people happy that they need to keep happy, which they failed to do last season, and also make more considered signings. I think it felt sometimes like they'd sign people too early. Maybe there's 4 players for this one spot sometimes last season, so they can't be doing that again, and they need to move to a more considered approach. And
to also ease your headaches on how many articles you have to write on how many players Chelsea are signing.
January was a bit of a shock, let's say.
I did think that.
One a day.
One a day. I think 2 a day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But as well, let's go back to the chat. We see James D has said, any news on Loftus-Cheek? I know Jerry, you just mentioned there. Is that a full done deal now to AC Milan?
Yeah, just announcement, and that's it. Medical's been done, so we're just waiting for the announcement. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see him in. Another one. You're quite sad that he's gone. He's Mr. Chelsea as well, a bit like Mason Mount, even more so maybe because he's from the area, but. I think he needed it, didn't he? And it's lovely to see one of our players going overseas, and maybe he can start pushing himself back into England reckoning.
Yeah, because Tammy did well, tomorrow he's done well,
And he's going to get a bigger squad role at Chelsea. He always seemed like a bit of a bit part player, never really established himself. Still did well.
One position, was there? He was just, they'd fit him in everywhere like a Swiss Army knife.
When you start playing wing back, it's probably writings on the wall, right? I think for him that was the time maybe and he's always sort of waited it out at Chelsea, but I'm really happy that he's been brave enough to go and pursue this opportunity.
Just one quick question about Poch, because we were in that briefing with Todd Burley, the new owners, when they came in, and they did a sort of off the record briefing about Graham is our man. It's a 5-year project, and then a few months later he's gone. I mean, Poch you think is going to be there long term, but there's still no guarantees. I mean, just before coming in, I look back on I've been covering Chelsea since the late 80s, so 34 years.
Yeah.
Pochettino is the 28th manager I've dealt with in that period at Chelsea, going back to Bobby Campbell. Right? And in their first 60-odd years, 62 years, they had 7 managers. They've had 28 in the last 34. So long-term manager sort of reigns at Chelsea just haven't happened, have they, for a long time?
I think he
will need time, won't he? He needs a few years to turn it around.
He will need time. I hope the expectations are realistic. So probably get a bit of a sense of that on pre-season, like how realistic the expectations are. And I'm hoping that Europa League finish even would be acceptable for him, because I think that would be a relative achievement coming from where they've come from. And with all the new players, a lot of them are very young. So try and do that. I mean, the Premier League as well is harder than ever. Everyone's rich now. Everyone's won the lottery in the Premier League. So yeah, Chelsea one of the richest teams in the league, but they all are now. Villa are very aggressive in the transfer market, and Newcastle. So it's a lot of players to deal with. So I think that's going to be tricky. And just think that Chelsea do want a long-term manager. They have for a while. I think for the old owners wanted Tuchel to be the man potentially, but then new owners had different ideas. So it's just like there's always something in Chelsea's sphere that pulls them off course, and certainly they wanted Potter to be the main guy, but and now they want Poch. So I think they do want that. He's only got a 2-year deal, which is a bit concerning, but I think there's good faith there that they want him to be a long-term manager, and we'll see. Football is chaotic, and most clubs are, but Chelsea seems to be just that little bit more.
Yeah, because loads of Spurs fans wanted Poch back, didn't they?
Yeah.
And from what we gather, Daniel Levy didn't even pick up the phone, maybe because he just thought, it's not going to happen here, don't come back. Yeah. But what do you think of Postecoglou? Because I think there's been a mixed reaction, but I think most Spurs fans who got sick of the sort of Mourinho, Conte, Nuno style of football, was very defensive, wasn't sort of Tottenham style. They're quite excited about him, aren't they?
Yeah, I think he's a good, probably project manager, which is nice. I think that's what they need. I think maybe,
they need a reset as well, don't they?
They need a reset as well. Daniel Levy's idea was probably, with Mourinho and with Conte, we need to win now, and they didn't really get there, did they? And it's unfortunate. And then the club's left in a worse position. Now they're left picking up the pieces, needing a manager to start and build a culture, because I think a lot of Spurs fans are also, similar to some Chelsea fans, are a bit disconnected, aren't they, with the club? And it's been pretty abysmal season as well. It's a similar outcome to what Chelsea had, just maybe a bit less chaotic. And then some of the good players are getting older. Kane might move on at some point, maybe even this summer. So yeah, there's a lot to do for Ange, but I think it's maybe a good fit. He's seen as a progressive manager. Of course, it's a step up for him. So we'll see how he can do in the most difficult league in the world, and that's probably where the slight unknown is, because he's been in sort of lesser leagues for most of his career.
And Maddison's a good step up, a good sign of intent as well, because he's an attacking midfield player.
Yeah.
We get the impression Ange wants to play on the front foot, doesn't we? Yeah. And I think that's what Spurs fans want to see, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think my colleague Dan Kilpatrick, who covers Tottenham a lot, he made a great
comment.
We know
Dan, yeah.
He made a great comment where he's just like, it's as close as Spurs can get to like a definite sort of quality player, because it's just, we know he can play in the Premier League and we know he's an England international. So with Spurs in the market that they shop in, it's an absolutely exceptional signing. And you know what? He could compete with players like Mason Mount. That's what he's looking to do. He's looking to outshine, those sort of rivals, so he can play in the Euros with Gareth Southgate. And maybe he can.
And Ange Postecoglou and Pochettino are sort of very similar in the sense of they're two managers that have come into two clubs that are in dire need of a good project. Have you found that's been the biggest similarity with them two going into next season?
Yeah, I think so. I think they'll be both sort of doing the same job really as each other. Maybe Poch will have a bit more budget than Ange, but I think that's probably where they'll be. And I also think maybe Spurs have a better squad than Chelsea right now, so it's a very, very similar situation. And those two teams are probably right up beside each other in the table. So they're direct competitors now for next season.
And interestingly, and Spurs fans won't want to hear this, but what Burley and Bedard was saying about the what they were doing, hoping Graham Potter was going to bring. They looked at the Arsenal model and the success they got with Arteta, sticking with a young manager who had a clear way of playing and giving him time, and that really came good for Arsenal last year, didn't it? And Chelsea were basing their plan on that, and they probably are to some extent. And maybe that's what Tottenham need to do: is start looking at what Arsenal have done. Yeah,
I think that Chelsea really viewed what Arsenal did really positively, and they thought Potter could do it. And I think that they really waited till the last minute. I mean, fans were really calling for his head. So I think that a lot of clubs are looking at that. It took didn't really take Guardiola time, but it took Klopp a lot of time as well. So he's actually the blueprint, not Arteta, but Arteta's certainly a recent good example.
And going back to we mentioned Moises Caicedo, which arguably is he's up there with one of the biggest deals, I think, of the summer transfer window potentially, maybe behind Rice, because Caicedo's been linked with a lot of big clubs, hasn't he? Not just in this window, in January as well. Of course, January, that saga with Arsenal, everybody knows about him pleading almost to say to Brighton, can I leave to go to Arsenal? But this window's a little bit different. Now Arsenal have nearly got Rice, not 100% confirmed yet. Manchester United and Chelsea are in the run for it. The fact that Mount, as the deal has been agreed for him to go to Manchester United, do you feel like this has opened the door even bigger now for Chelsea to secure his signature?
Yeah, I do. I think they need to get that midfielder in. Just need the numbers for one, and then I think that financially they're going to be very strong. I mean, there was this sort of talk of a soft deadline for Chelsea, so it was like 30th of June, which is the end of the accounting year. Chelsea just spent 600 million across the last two transfer windows, a world record. So now they've brought in about 200 million, which helps balance the books. So I think they feel a bit more confident going into the market for who will be their most expensive outlay in the market. And I think that we'll start to see Chelsea being aggressive probably from next week. And coincidentally, Pochettino will be in the building, which will be very exciting.
And how much do you see that transfer being? Because, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Caicedo was around 75 million Arsenal were willing to give up, and that was in January. So is that going to be around about that figure or even more?
Yeah, I think maybe slightly more than that figure, but I don't think much more. Has been talk of 100 million. I don't think it'll be 100 million, but they will try and benchmark against Rice's fee. So you always look at who else has moved in the market, and Brighton might argue that Caicedo's just as good as Rice, and I think some people do think he might even be better. So they could try and benchmark against that. But there is a soft agreement apparently between Roberto De Zerbi and Caicedo that he can leave a certain type of bid comes in.
He's the next N'Golo Kante, isn't he? I mean, he's that sort of player. It looks like he's got 3 lungs.
Fantastic.
He just gets everywhere on the pitch, doesn't he?
But much bigger.
But as well, this is also a very similar deal to when Mark Cucurella went to Chelsea from Brighton. So maybe the relationship's already there. And this moves me on nicely to what me and Jerry were actually discussing off camera before you arrived today, is how does the relationships between the clubs work when transfers happen? Because I think what we've seen, haven't we, Jerry, in the last, it's got to be over 5-6 years now, is that relationship built between 2 rivals in Arsenal and Chelsea. Yeah. I mean, we've seen Petr Cech go, Chelsea legend, by the way. Yeah. We've seen David Luiz, Willian, not to mention Fabregas. And now Jorginho, Kai Havertz. Mm-hmm. Is it quite crazy how 2 rivals can almost let the players happen? Because the transfers that have happened have been quite smooth, haven't they?
Yeah. And Giroud was a great player, wasn't he?
Actually, Cole, that wasn't so smooth.
No, that wasn't. No. Does it help? I don't know. I think that there is sort of that tension and stuff still with the deals, but certainly I think there's a pragmatism in modern football. The chairman always go and meet up and stuff like that. So I think generally the clubs are like positive to each other's faces, but then maybe slightly have some problems behind each other's backs. And I think that's sort of how the relationships often are. But certainly Chelsea have a good relationship with Brighton. They've gave Brighton a lot of money lately, and also they've taken a sporting director from Brighton. So there's actual, genuine friendships. And in football, people accept that you're going to move around. So, there's people working at Man United who used to work at Chelsea, same with Liverpool and Man City and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that going on.
And my theory on the Chelsea-Arsenal bromance, if you like...
It is a bromance.
Is that they both hate Tottenham. Yeah. And, there's no chance that Tottenham are going to do business with Arsenal and Chelsea, especially after, you say, after the Sol Campbell deal, for example, things like that. But if a player wants to stay in the capital, there are still 3 clubs of biggish size that they can go to. So rather than go from Arsenal to Spurs or from Chelsea to Spurs or vice versa, it's easier to go from Arsenal to Chelsea and vice versa, isn't it?
I know. Chelsea and Spurs rarely do deals, and similar with Arsenal. No. And also the good example of this is Pochettino. So there was a sense that he would never, move across the city to Arsenal. But with Chelsea, he was sort of willing to do it. So there's another one there as well, where there's that sort of sense of a little bit of rivalry. But I don't know. Maybe actually Spurs fans are quite upset about the move as
I think they will be quite upset, to be honest.
I think there's a lot of Spurs fans who just sort of still would love to see Pochettino at Tottenham, and they'll just find it really upsetting to see him leading a Chelsea team, especially at the Tottenham Stadium. That'd be a strange one.
Tottenham have had a lot of Chelsea managers as well, to be fair. Even if they've not had a lot of Chelsea players. But I think that what I was told,
Villas-Boas.
One fan told me it's fine if they're not successful, but if they're successful, then
that's when it stings. That is when it stings.
Exactly that.
And Nizaar, I know we've had so many questions for Darmish on our first podcast, and I'm going to ask you a similar one. It's always interesting being a journalist working in and around a transfer window, not just in the season covering games. It's a 2-part question. First one, how much of a headache do you get through sort of trying to dig out information, and how has your relationship been, and how do you find your information as such to make sure they are as a reliable source as such?
Yeah, well, try and have a broad range of sources. I think is important. So if you're just a one source wonder, then you might get some stories, but you're kind of waiting around on other days. So it could be anyone from anyone who works in the game basically, and the closer to the action the better. So that's kind of how you sort of source stuff. I'm always on the phone, unfortunately, always on my WhatsApps. My WhatsApps are flying up. I don't know how many I'm going to have after this, and Twitter, Facebook and all that, and kind of building a social following does help as well, and being consistent. So getting things right and being consistent, then people will come to you more and trust you more, and your audience trusts you more as well. So it's like almost a cycle of constantly doing it and doing it well will help you. So the longer you're doing it, the easier it is to do as well. So I've found that over time. But also going to the matches and meeting people. So like when I go to the matches, I try and meet people who have sources, and also working with other journalists. If you have a big story, they might be sniffing around as well. Sometimes it's worth working together, especially overseas with other reporters who may be close to the action at other clubs, and you can sometimes be sold bad information, even from like big name sources. So it's always good to check it out with a number of different people, see what the situation is. And often people have different opinions of what a situation is as well. So the Mount situation was a very emotional one, going from one big club to another. So that would be a good example where try and get a few different sources, a few different voices telling you what the situation is, and you can present it in a much better way.
And I remember being at the World Cup with you, and we were talking about going out for a bite to eat, maybe a drink, and he said, "Oh, actually, I've got to go and meet a source of mine, and firm up a relationship out there." And even in the middle of the World Cup in Doha, where we were doing 2 games a day at times, it was that mad period, wasn't there? Sort of 28 games in 14 days, I think, at one point. You were still getting out there, meeting your new sources and getting little bits and pieces, weren't you?
You've got to recognise the opportunities which the World Cup was. Loads of agents, loads of chairmen, loads of that kind of stuff down there, watching the games, enjoying the hospitality, but also doing their own business. So it was important, I thought, to try and get out there a little bit and see people. And yeah, London's a great spot for it as well. London's one of the cities that it really is where football happens. Even Manchester United, a club in Manchester, has an office here. Yeah. My
other memory of the World Cup with you was sitting next to you in that Morocco-Spain game, because you're half Moroccan, Moroccan heritage.
What a moment.
Shout out Morocco. And, shout out Morocco. Big shout.
And that moment, the winning penalty, a little fist pump under the table, very professional, like a duck, calm above water, below the desk. It was that.
I think it's good to mention to the viewers, by the way, that we're actually not allowed as journalists and reporters to celebrate goals or anything like that.
It's not. It's not etiquette.
It's not etiquette.
It's been done. It's been done. I'll tell you that much.
I reckon the Morocco goal was a few. I heard there was a few fist bumps.
Yeah, I don't really do it, but that was just too much for me to hold in.
I got a little video of that actually of you doing that, and we'll put that out one day.
Guys, as well, please make sure we've got about 5 minutes or so before we will end the live. So please do keep your questions coming in. We'll have maybe a few minutes at the end to list off some of your questions to Nizaar, who again has taken time out of his busy schedule to come into the podcast studio today. And as well, of course, please drop a like on the stream if you are enjoying it. But back to the transfer gossip as such. Let me see if there is any questions in the chat. There is loads of people letting us know where they're from in the world as well, Jerry. We've got Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, Sweden, Brussels, all over the world. I think my question actually to Nizaar, on your life stories as such, what's been one of the best transfer stories that you've covered throughout your time so far? Well,
I'm trying to think, but I mean, Chelsea just generally recently has been absolutely mad and brilliant. I mean, the new owners covering that story was really fun, especially in the beginning. I mean, it's fun and tiring, it's all the same, but that summer going away on pre-season, when they're signing players like Raheem Sterling, he's coming into the camp, you're kind of there in America and you're kind of seeing them for the first time coming into the group and seeing what it's like. I quite enjoy that. I do enjoy pre-season for that reason, especially around, big transfers. So it might happen this summer. I'm going with the team to America, and not just Chelsea, but I think this time Fulham, Brentford, lots of other teams will be there as well. So
Wrexham, they're playing Wrexham, aren't they?
Wrexham.
I mean, they've gone big time Premier League in 4 years. Would you say?
I've never seen Wrexham.
That's a great story.
One to tick off. Hopefully meet the owners. So
incredible.
Everyone wants to meet the owners.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah, so that's probably some of the most exciting transfers.
And what's the one story you think is just going to rumble and rumble? There's always one every summer, isn't there? Do you think it's Kane because the Bayern Munich one's there, isn't it? And he's not batting them away. He's not saying one thing or another.
I've heard it's just the money. Yeah. That's what I've heard as well, as well as the fact that he maybe doesn't want to go abroad with his family as well. But I've heard the money's been a real issue. Yeah,
potentially. I think. But where's he going to move this summer? If he wants to move this summer, it's probably going to be abroad. Man United have been scared off from bidding because Spurs used to not sell to London clubs. Now they just don't sell to anyone.
United used to be a preferred destination, didn't it? Berbatov, Carrick,
Well, they've caught Man United up a lot, so that's kind of happened, hasn't it? So it's kind of like, he can't leave. So it could just be that he's stuck on a free transfer. Then we go into January, and he could move then because it'll be even cheaper. Do you take 40 million from them and sort of cash in on him and try and sign a striker? So, and it's quite interesting, and I don't think a lot of the viewers might know this, but with sort of transfers, especially strikers and goalkeepers, if one falls, it's like buying a house, then another one goes and another one goes. So you'll see a rapid, because money's moving around the market, you'll see a rapid cascade of, so Spurs will sign a striker, maybe they go for a Jonathan David or something from Lille, and then Lille will have loads of money, they'll sign a striker, and everyone's signing strikers all of a sudden because there's money in the market. And it usually takes the biggest clubs to start that. So it could be Bayern Munich, it could be Man United, it could be Chelsea, and usually the money starts sloshing through the system.
It's like a domino effect as such.
Yeah, absolutely. Similar with goalkeepers as well, because Man United are in for Andre Onana, so Inter will then sign a goalkeeper, and then people signing goalkeepers left, right and centre.
And the other thing with Kane, obviously, is, Daniel Levy's just put a new manager in place. Is he going to say to him, right, here's the squad, but by the way, we're selling our best player? It seems a strange message to send out, doesn't it?
It does. I think maybe that's it. And you've got a new manager coming in. Is it ideal for him to build a system when you lose your leader? And you're going to lose Lloris as well, right? So at Spurs,
the two most senior players. Probably Dyer as well. So that's three of the sort of senior squad.
Yeah. So it's a lot. Again, that could be not as mad as Chelsea, but actually, if you're looking at the characters they're losing, it's significant.
Well, Jerry, I don't know if you've got anything else you want to add. I think in the comments we're just flying with how many countries are watching us right now. By the way, we've got Kenya, we've got Jamaica, we've got Sweden, Uganda, we've got all sorts. Anything else you want to add, Jerry?
Well, I was just going to say that's the worst Jamaican accent I've ever heard in my life. That's up there with Clive Tilsley's Sunshine. I think that one.
I tried. Listen, I'll just stick to presenting. I'm not gonna carry on with any impressions. But yeah, we're at 45 minutes on the dot, by the way. So thank you so much. We've still got over 150 people watching us right now. So thank you so much for tuning in. Nizaar as well, who is super busy in pre-season on the transfer. So thank you so much for taking your time to come in. And of course, Jerry, thank you for joining the hot seat as well. But for myself, Charlie Willard here in the HaytersTV podcast studio, which, by the way, we are absolutely flying out the videos and content for you. So again, please do make sure you do drop a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, because it will alert you whenever we post any podcasts, videos. And remember, it's pre-season. We are going to be out there covering pre-season content for all the big clubs. So yeah, of course, please make sure you do subscribe. And as well, let us know in the comments any other guests you want to see come and join the hot seat where Nizaar is right now. But yeah, for myself, Charlie, Nizaar and Jerry Cox, thank you so much for listening and watching us. And I'll catch you in another episode of the HaytersTV podcast.